the most famous writer of all time and the most quoted author, William Shakespeare. Study with Ruslana. This is a replica of the Globe Theatre that stands on the edge of London and was part owned by Shakespeare, who also added 1,700 new words to the English language and wrote 37 plays that are still performed all over the world today, and they were a cultural phenomenon during his lifetime. We will also get to find out what's the connection between the planet Saturn and Shakespeare. Stay till the end so you will know the answer. And right now, we will get a chance to meet him. Well, not actually. He passed away 400 years ago, but we will still get to investigate the secrets of his masterwork as well as his own story. The Globe Theatre is currently one of the most famous tourist attractions in London, but the very first one was built in 1599. That's nearly 423 years ago. But before this one was built, it was actually rebuilt twice before. But why? During the Renaissance, Europe was going through a revolution. Arts and technology became more developed, and theaters also began to change and evolve. New stories presented new themes, like romance, histories, and tragedies. And the new plays became extremely popular. Everyone from the poor laborers to the rich merchants to the nobilities rushed to the theaters to witness these revolutionized plays. And that's when Shakespeare came in, probably the first scriptwriter to come to your mind when you think of plays in the 16th century. William Shakespeare's biography was always assumed and never quite clear due to the fact there were not much written records. But historians who study him believe he was born on April 23, 1564. He was the eldest among his 7 siblings and grew up in Stratford-upon-Avon in England. But he later moved to London, where he was married when he was 18 years old, while his wife was 26, and they had 3 children. Ironically, despite being classed as the world's best writer, Shakespeare couldn't spell. The Lord Chamberlain Men, later known as the King's Men, was a company that was part owned by Shakespeare, and they were the ones who opened up the very first Globe Theatre, a permanent playhouse located only 400 yards away from the replica, for the first time in 1599, and it was the beginning of a new era. The Globe Theatre was a 3-story high building with a thatched open roof and a stage in a central yard, and the plays would take place no matter the weather, snow, rain or shine. In fact, the Globe Theatre was often referred as the Wooden O due to its open roof appearance. But the main element of all Shakespeare's work was that every class got to witness his marvelous plays, as you could either pay 1 penny and stand as a groundling in a central yard, or buy a seat in the galleries and enjoy in comfort. All of Shakespeare's plays are divided into 3 genres: comedy, histories, and tragedies, and the flags outside the theatre which indicate which genre we'll be playing inside. Black flags were raised for tragedies, red for histories, and white for comedies. It was all going great. Shakespeare's most incredible work, like Henry V, As You Like It, Hamlet, and Macbeth, were performed to the public where even Shakespeare himself once had a role. But in 1613, a stage cannon misfired and burned down the theatre. This was the end of the Globe Theatre No. 1. The Globe Theatre No. 2 was reopened shortly after in 1614, and Shakespeare continued to amaze the public with his final incredible work. And it operated until 1642, when the Parliamentary closed it down due to the First English Civil War outbreak. But we still get to witness how the real one was built by visiting the replica in England. But it is built as similar as possible to the original, but in a more modern way, so no more worries about a cannon misfiring again. There are many features that make up a Shakespeare play, and it really all depends on the genre, but they follow a similar structure. Exposition, introduction to the characters and settings. Rising action, where the main character would face some obstacles. Climax, the main dramatic event of the story. Falling action, where all the misunderstandings are solved and all the puzzle pieces are put back together. And the denouement, the conclusion of the story. Now let's have an overview of all the genres of a Shakespeare play. Tragedies, tragic and dramatic plays that would always have a sad ending and the main character would end up in a worse situation than when they started. They also include human flaws and tragic heroes. Comedies, funny and comical plays that give us a break from those tragedies. They're very lighthearted and the main character would end up in a better situation than when they started. They have happy endings like marriage, puns, mistaken identities, and idyllic settings. History. Shakespeare history plays are based off past English kings and heroes, and they were set in the medieval times. However, the events did not actually occur before, and they are not historically accurate. Now let's see what type of speeches are common in all Shakespeare plays. Monologues, a long speech by one character on the play. An aside, a short line of text that is spoken directly to the audience. A soliloquy, a long speech by one character to other characters on the play. Dialogue, a conversation between two characters. Now let's play whether this is a history, comedy, or tragedy. You'll have 5 seconds and write your answers in the comments below. Good luck! Romeo and Gillette, a play about a young hero, Romeo, and heroine, Gillette, and their families, the Montagues and the Capulets, that are fierce enemies. Romeo falls in love with Gillette, but they are restricted from marrying each other. Not being able to cope with the fact they could not be together, the play ends with them killing themselves. And on that happy note, is this a comedy, history, or tragedy? Midsummer's Night Dream, a play about 4 Athenians in a love triangle with different people liking each other. That's when they get stuck in a magical forest where a mischievous fairy named Puck plays tricks on them and the fairy queen. He reverses the magic in the end and the two couples marry happily. Macbeth. This play is based off a Scottish king. When 3 witches tell a Scottish general he is going to become the king of Scotland, Macbeth, encouraged by his wife, kills the current king and becomes the new king. Macbeth is then driven by guilt and sees the ghost of Duncan, the king that he killed, and is later murdered by Macduff, another character in the play. This one will probably trick you. Remember to put your answers in the comments below. An interesting play about Henry V of England, who wants to claim the French throne as he believes he has the right to do so. After many battles, loss, deaths, and powerful speeches, he unites the 2 nations by marrying the French princess. Hamlet. To be or not to be? This is the question. Let's find out more about this play, which is actually the longest he has written, and decipher this quote. Hamlet is an only child, and his uncle wants to take over his father's throne, hence killing him. Hamlet isn't guided by his father, now a ghost, but he doesn't know what to do with his life or his uncle's, and that's when he states to be or not to be, which means to live or not to live. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. This is one of Shakespeare's most famous quotes, but that's not all he left in his legacy. Did you know that The Lion King is based entirely off Hamlet, and his work even reached space, as some of Saturn's satellites are named after his characters, like Gilletta or Desdemona. But despite there being over hundreds of articles about him, and 90% of schools teach about him, there is a question about his authorship and whether he ever existed. What do you think about this? That was Ruslana Science. I'll see you in my next episode.